Okay, so once again, listening friends, we're sorry that our live was cut short, but yeah, I guess we're once again having some internet issues. But no doubt we still want to continue with the program this evening, and so we're doing a recording. But yeah, we want to share with you a bit of what it is when we talk about the school and the home working together in the education or for or educating our children. So this evening, as I mentioned, we have Mr. Craig with us. I'm going to allow him once again to introduce himself a little bit to us. So go ahead, Craig.
Yes, well, good evening. My name is Craig, and I'm married to my wife, Rebecca, for about 12 years now, and we have two sons that we love dearly. And I've invested a bit of time in education and school administration, teaching, and so I've been doing that for most of the last 12 years or so. And so I do care deeply about education and teaching and the well-being of children as they grow and as they develop and become beneficial, useful, prepared adults.
Absolutely. So that is the goal tonight. So we're going to be talking about education, and maybe we're going to start, Craig, by maybe defining what education is, maybe from a Christian perspective. When we talk about education, what is education? What would you say education is?
Yeah, well, education, I don't know. I would look at it and maybe say it's preparing and training a child for the future. Mm-hmm. And, you know, everybody's concerned about that. But I guess maybe as Christians, we look at it from the perspective of preparing a child for the future to be useful in God's kingdom and preparing them to be an equipped, well-trained adult that, you know, can bless their church, their community, other homes, and then even beyond that, prepared for an eternity after death. And so it's that process that we can prepare children for what's coming. And so it's, you know, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of energy, and, you know, God's designed that the first, 12, 16 years of a child's life, there's a lot of time put into preparing them for the future.
Right. Preparing them for the future, and I think there's an important thing that you mentioned, as well as preparing them for an eternity. That is also important when we think of education, isn't it? Yeah. So now, as we look at education, who would you say is responsible then for the education of a child?
Yeah, as I think about the word responsible, it's an interesting word.
Yes.
And it's a heavy word. And I don't know, maybe I would compare it to, maybe I sold my vehicle and I got $10,000 for it. And then I give it to you and I say, would you be responsible for this money? I can't go to the bank right now. Would you please take care of it for me over the weekend until I can go to the bank? And so I give it to you and you're responsible for it. And so I come back to you Monday morning and I say, could I have my money?
Yeah.
And you're the one that was charged with that. And if it's missing, you're the one in trouble.
Yes.
And so being responsible for the education of a child means that the person that needs to make sure that happens, they can delegate it, they can ask for help, but the one that ultimately holds that responsibility. And if you look through the pages of Scripture, you find that God has charged parents. God has given that responsibility to parents. And so back in Deuteronomy 6, God told parents to teach children diligently when you're in your house sitting down, when you're walking down the road, when you wake up, when you go to sleep. Parents have that responsibility to teach. And so at first it falls to parents. Now, God did define maybe a little more clearly in the New Testament in Ephesians 6, I believe, he speaks to parents and says that dads, bring the children up in the nurture and admonition, that the teaching and the discipline of God. And so it's a responsibility of parents, and maybe it comes back to dads, that we need to make sure that it happens. Now, asking for help, delegating, some of that gets delegated to the church, maybe some teaching there, maybe school, but it's the responsibility of the parents to make sure that happens.
Absolutely, and I think that covers a wide range of different things. I guess one of the things every day, I think a parent has the opportunity to instill values in a child. Now, when we think of education, we're just not talking about the academics of education, but maybe we're talking about something more. Would you say is education just about academics, maybe, or what more we must teach a child?
As I guess the longer I teach, the more I come to understand how big that is, and how it starts when that child is a baby. I think somebody said, the critical time for training a child especially is between 1 and 2 years old. You're setting a foundation for them. And so that's when some of the obedience and some of the habits and the discipline is taught, manners and things like that. And so it involves those things from a young age. If that's missing, it's going to be very difficult to do the academics at school. Teachers are going to spend their whole day trying to take care of some of that. And that's a part of it, because children aren't perfect by the time they get to school. But some of those manners and that training, that's parents have a big part in making that happen from baby up.
And so what we're saying, or what you're saying, Craig, if some of the foundations, those are fundamental things that must be taught at home. And if some of those are missing when a child comes to that age of then coming into the education system, whether it is at school or outside of that, if the foundation was missing from it makes it rather difficult for the child. Isn't that so? So
it does. And too often we as parents, we realize that later. We get started training our children and they get up to 5, 6 years old, and all of a sudden we realize that we missed a few things. And so we look back and we say, okay, maybe at these younger ages, we could have done a few things differently. And so that is something that, as parents, we need to work on at those young ages. That it starts then. And it's not just the training, manners and discipline. It's also just teaching them to love learning.
Yes.
When they're outside, they watch things. Oh, what's that bird? And oh, look at the stars up there, the constellations. What's that star? And smelling a flower, and just getting them, awakening those senses to love the process of learning. And when they get to school, their minds are alive and they're interested. And so that's another thing that needs to start early.
Yes, very, very much so. That's some of the development of a child that a parent is responsible for. I guess that's defining then the role of a parent is to teach them just to love learning is very important. Now, how, like you said, you mentioned some things that, go outside, we smell the flower, we look at nature. That's a good way to teach your kids. But in our day and age, I think we're kind of falling short of that, aren't we? How would you respond to that? Could it be that maybe something else is taking the place of those ways of teaching children? What would you say to that?
Yeah, some children don't have the opportunity to go outside, and you have that, but then you also have a lot of media use that tends to replace some of that, and so it can make it difficult, because it's easier to hand the child a device rather than take them outside and it's air conditioning inside maybe, or it's at least out of the sun, and outside it's in the sun and you get a little sweaty, and but that's important for the development of the child. There are easier substitutes. It takes work to awaken and build interest in children.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned something quite important. Again, I think it falls back on the parent to take that stand. Especially when that child is in that early stage of development, where we take that stand and say, you know what, I am responsible. We need to learn to take responsibility as a parent, saying, I am responsible for the blessing that God has given me through this child. And so I have to be a good steward of how that I use that blessing in a sense, and saying, hey, I want to instill values in this child that's not only going to benefit him, but will benefit everyone he comes in contact with.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's a two-way street, I would say.
Yes, and you mentioned, just as a parent, sensing that responsibility. And I would say, that's something that I've grown in and understanding, and I'm learning that, it needs to be a very personal responsibility. We need to sense the weight of that, and that compels us then to try to do it well.
Absolutely. And I think the Bible does say we ought to train up a child in the way he should go. And when he's old, he will not depart from. I can think of things that my father instilled in me, or my mother, things that they taught me that today, back then, as a young man, I thought, man, these people, they're not all that wise. But the older I get, I say, hey, you know what? My parents were pretty wise people, even though they might not have a degree, a bachelor's or a master's degree, but they were pretty wise. Now, the older I get, I realize how wise they were, because they instilled values in me, hard work, dedication. My father was like, stay to it, stick to whatever you start and finish what you start. So that's important. So these are some of the things, these are defining the role of a parent. But now as we switch gears a little bit, maybe let's look at the institution, the education institution for a little bit.
Sure.
What are some of the things that maybe we're facing as challenges? What are the roles of the education institution then in the development of a child?
Sure. Well, many parents delegate that responsibility to the school. Many parents would say that they're not comfortable or competent doing that themselves, and so they delegate that to an institution, which is fine, and so then that institution carries the responsibility to help the child develop. And academics, that's a big part of what happens in school. There are things that children need to know, how to read, how to write, numbers, some of those basics. You're very limited in life if you can't do that. So some of those things become the responsibility then of the school to lead out in. But also a lot of other things happen at school. I've just become more and more aware of how much of school is not just the academics.
Yeah.
Just today I was actually thinking about that. One of my teachers came, and there was a student that had missed some of their work, and it was the second time that had happened. And so, what do you do in a case like that? Do you punish the child for missing a little bit? And that maybe could be appropriate. But as I thought about that, I realized that, okay, here's a life skill that needs to be taught. Double checking your work. After you think you're finished, go back and review everything. And so there's an opportunity to teach a life skill. And so school is about some of those things as well, the habits and personal disciplines that need to be taught.
Yeah.
And school is an excellent place to teach some of those things. Manners, relationships relating to others, peers relating to authority, lots of things like that. School's an excellent place to make that happen.
Absolutely. And sometimes, I think us as parents sometimes think, well, I'm sending my child to school, and that releases me of the responsibility of the education of my child, because that's why I'm paying tuition. That's why I'm sending my kids to school, And so sometimes that can be a bit challenging for the school, no doubt. So tell me, what are some of the challenges that maybe you face or in the education institution where we some of the challenges we face? I mean, as a teacher for 10 years, I've faced a lot of things in the classroom or even in administration of the school when it dealing with the parents. But what are some of the challenges that the school faces when it comes to parent-school relationship, maybe?
Yes. Well, I will say this. I've been blessed during my 12 years of teaching in school administration. I've been blessed with to work with good parents. And so I'm
Wow.
grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
Not perfect, but very supportive, and I'm grateful for that. Some of the challenges, though, there are still times where, you would appreciate even more support than what you get. And so, when a parent stops in and they say, how's my child doing?
Mm-hmm.
And they just checking in how my child's doing, or, I noticed this in their work, like what happened today at school, just communicating, and, that means a lot to a teacher, just that interest, not overbearing and controlling and manipulating the teacher or controlling the child, but a healthy interest can do so much. And just making sure the child shows up at school and they're prepared for the day, they have the supplies, they had a good breakfast, they woke up more than 3 minutes before they needed to be at school. Some of those things make a huge difference. I would probably compare the effort at school to somewhat of an airplane. You've got the bigger airplanes anyway, you've got an engine on this side and an engine on this side. And you could ask, well, which engine would you like on your airplane? And I would say both.
Right.
And you could say one engine is like the parents and one's like the teachers, the school. When you've got both working, you move forward.
Absolutely.
And so I would say, it's that cooperation between the two.
Yeah.
At school, we've got challenges, but we appreciate when the other engine is running,
Right.
and we can push together.
Yes.
We just really appreciate that.
And that at times can be challenging. What does it take? I mean, I think maybe good communication between the home and the school is an important factor in making sure that these both engines work properly.
It is, and teachers aren't perfect. Teachers make mistakes as well, and we acknowledge that. And so sometimes we should communicate more. Sometimes maybe we communicate too much, and so. It takes a bit of grace, teacher toward parent and parent toward teacher, saying, you know what, we're in it together. We're going to make this thing work.
Yes. Now, I think once that is not working properly, if the engines fail, well, we're setting ourselves up for disaster. But think about the child. How does this affect the child when there is not a good working relation between home and school? How does this affect the child then?
Well, unfortunately, the child is the one that usually suffers the most.
Right.
If parents don't take that responsibility seriously, or even on the teacher part, if we don't communicate well and some of those things, it's the child ultimately that suffers most, because it's their learning, it's their foundation for a lot of things in life that is hindered. And, we saw some of those effects during COVID, where there was a hindrance to the child's education and many children are affected.
Yeah.
And that's large scale. But that same thing happens if parents don't support and take that interest in their child's education. You've got a child here, a child there, that they leave school and they're not prepared for life ahead. And so, unfortunately, it's the child that usually takes the biggest blow.
Yeah, and that's going to affect every area of the child's life, or even as they grow older, it is going to affect their life, whether it is emotionally, socially, I don't know. Would you say that this can be the reason why sometimes maybe we see in our society that there's so many issues that we just don't understand why they're happening? Social issues, could it be that we maybe missed the fundamental at the beginning? Maybe parents haven't been taking their role seriously, and I'm not casting blame on parents, but I'm just saying this is a very important role. It's a shoe that most people need to take seriously. Walk in that shoe seriously, because it's not something to take lightly, right? So it's important, I'd say, parents, sometimes it can be challenging, but it's important that we take, or even though it's challenging, it's important we take that role seriously. Wouldn't you say?
I would maybe insert a clarification that education in itself is not the cure for all of the woes that our society faces. Education by itself isn't going to fix all the troubles we face, because that comes back to a changed heart and a changed life through Jesus.
Absolutely.
That purpose that we have in life. But I will agree with you that support from a parent, that training and that education is a huge influence, and it is a cause for a lot of the difficulties that people face.
Yeah.
And so those first 16, 18, 20 years of a child's life have a huge influence on the next 50.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we talk a little bit about the challenges, but what does it look like? What the picture changes a little bit when we have that cooperation, when school and home is working together. What are some of the benefits that the teacher can experience, the administration of the school, the parents, the child experiences when there is a communication, when there is a working together? From your experience, what are some of that benefit that we can
Yes,
experience?
well, I've watched teachers. I enjoy watching teachers in their role. And, I enjoy watching a teacher when they've got support from a parent. And, on good days, and even on the difficult days, if they know that they need to talk to the parent a little bit and that parent is going to be supportive, they go into the conversation and they feel good about it because they know there's support there. So the stress level is way down.
Right.
And, they feel very differently. And so teachers tremendously appreciate that cooperation. And, they'll go home at the end of the day, and even though it was maybe a little bumpy, they had the support and they still feel good about it. And parents, when there's that communication, when things are going well and the parents know how it's going at school, they feel good about it. They appreciate it. And, you feel like investing more because you've got that working together. And so, and the children even, they know when things are going well.
Right.
They know when dad and mom find out what's happening at school. They care. They know how you did on the test. They know when you had a good day. They know when you got sent to the principal's office, things like that. And so the children, when they know that there's a working together, it boosts them.
Yes.
It boosts them.
Yes.
So everybody benefits. And in the end, the children end up learning a lot more when there's that working together.
Yes. And like you said, everybody benefits. There is a win-win situation.
It is, yes.
But let's talk about teachers. How are some maybe practical ways, apart from just all of this, that we as parents can support teachers in that role of teaching? I mean, I taught for a while, and I know how challenging teaching can be. Sometimes, as a parent now, I look back and I have a great appreciation for teachers because of the shoe that I filled some years ago. So I can appreciate my teachers, the teachers that are there doing the job. Teaching is a very noble occupation, I always say. But teaching is also one of the jobs that is very challenging. I don't know that everyone is cut out to teach, which would be great. I would love to teach more, but due to some other reasons, I haven't chosen to teach more. But what are some practical ways to support teachers in the role of teaching? I mean,
Sure.
Coming from a school administration.
Sure. Well, that's a good question, and it's something that probably all the teachers' ears right now are perking up. And I'm sure every teacher would have a list of things that they would want to share.
Yeah.
And so I'll try to be a voice for all of you teachers. I know teachers appreciate, I'll just maybe list a couple things that teachers tremendously appreciate. And attendance, making sure that the child is at school each day. I don't feel like going to school. And you don't show up. Or maybe you want to take this family trip and so just skip school. It's just one day.
Yeah.
And so, but it makes it challenging for the teacher. Then they need to, help the child catch up, and then they're behind and they miss the class. It's difficult. And so attendance,
Yes.
and even showing up on time. That's something small but huge. Just be there when the day gets started and start with everybody else.
Yeah. I guess for me, I remember teaching when one of my students was late. It was a challenge to try and get them up to date. You know, if they were constantly missing school or for whatever reason, you know, emergencies do happen. I understand
Absolutely.
that. But if it was a constant thing, whether it is for carelessness or on the parents' part, it is a challenge for the teacher because the teacher is always playing the catch-up game, you know. So yes, I understand fully what you're saying. Go ahead. You were gonna say something.
Yeah, parents are a huge part of that, just making sure the children come to school. And you know, students have homework; they need to carry it home, and making sure that gets done. That's a big thing, also. You know, students like to hand that off to an older brother or a cousin who lives there, and you know, the next day the teacher asks, "Who did your homework?" Big brother, or even mom did the homework. And that's just that's difficult. And so making sure that work gets done well. Plenty of rest. You know, they show up and they're tired and they fall asleep in class. And you know, we've had a few times where we simply let them sleep because it was just too much, which is unfortunate. Most of the time it doesn't happen that way. And so making sure they get sleep, making sure they get food and fresh water, carrying water to school is important for brain function. Just those little things actually make a huge difference for the child. You know, something else that maybe is even something bigger than those day-to-day things is a stable home where children can go home to, where they know they're loved, where there's discipline, consistent, firm discipline, but seasoned with lots of love and that support. And you know, dad and mom are both there. They love each other. You know, and I know that's not the case everywhere all the time, but children feel that. You know, and if mom's gone or if dad's gone, children feel that, and it makes a difference in their schoolwork. It affects how they do. And so, you know, parents, one of the biggest things that you can do is to love each other and be committed to each other for life. And that stability does wonders for a child's education.
And it affects a child emotionally. It affects a child physically. And those things are very important in the development of a child, is to be able to have an environment that they feel, you know, safe.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the school has to act as a safe haven for many of the students. And so I guess one of the roles of the school is simply sometimes to be a safe haven for children, which is sad, but that is reality sometimes for a child. You know, which affects a child's development.
It does. If the night before dad left and you know they didn't know where he went and they don't know when he's going to be back, and he was talking about doing things and he left and walked out. You know, the children come to school the next day. They're not going to get a lot of work done. And so you spend the day maybe trying to help them wrestle with some of those things, and you know that's a learning experience for them, and good things can come out of it, but it's difficult for the child and it affects them.
Yeah. Now let's switch gears a little bit, Craig. Maybe let's talk now from what the school must do. Maybe we talked a little bit about some of the practical things that parents can do for teachers, but let's talk about teachers now. What are some of the things that parents expect from teachers?
And that's a good question, and it's good for us as educators, as teachers, to think about that. And you know, once you're a parent, you see things from that perspective. And so if you're a teacher and also a parent, you know, you start thinking about, what do I want when I send my child to school? One of the things that I tell parents when they come to enroll at our school is that we want school to be a safe place. And that's the responsibility of the teachers and the school administration and everyone. We want school to be a safe place where that parents, when they drop their child off in the morning, they don't have to be worrying about what's happening at school.
Yes.
Bullying and all sorts of things. Things happen. Even with the best effort, things still happen. But you want to limit that and as much as you can to make so that doesn't happen, so that parents don't have to be worrying, what's happening to my child? And so making school as a safe place is one of the big responsibilities of the school, of the teachers. And then, as teachers, as educators, we have a responsibility to make sure we are prepared and equipped to teach. And not just do a mediocre job, but do it well.
Right.
The best that we can, know our content, to figure out how to best convey that content to children, come up with creative ways to teach that and help them remember it.
Right.
And so to be prepared for that. And then also classroom discipline, making sure that things that need taken care of. And so you've got those things, but then that teacher needs to maintain that link with the parents. If there's a problem, talk to the parents. Explain, not accusing parents, not always railing up and sharing all the negative things, but honestly have that communication. If there's a problem, talk to the parents. Parents don't like if they feel like the school is hiding things from them.
Yes.
That doesn't build trust. That doesn't go well. And so just that open communication, call up the parents, send them a message and say, hey, this happened today. Just wanted to let you know. And parents appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely. As a parent, I like to hear the concerns of the teacher when my child is at school and there are things happening at school, things that I don't see, and I know my children, so one of the things as an educator years ago that I always wondered about is when parents sometimes take the side of the child. And we want to do that. We want to support their children, but we also want to make sure that we listen to the voice of the teacher as well, because sometimes our children can, get sidetracked. Wouldn't you agree?
Children aren't perfect, neither are we as teachers, and so, there needs to be a willingness to listen back and forth and to honestly look at, what happened. Maybe the teacher made a mistake. Maybe my child made a mistake, and maybe the teacher has something I need to listen to carefully and do something about. And so just, communication, willingness to listen goes a long way.
Oh, yeah.
In all of life, including school.
Yes. And that's very true, Craig. I think this thing is a teamwork. Educating our children is a teamwork. It takes the teacher, it takes the parent, a school administration working as a team for that child. The child is the focus here. Sometimes we get, and I would agree, teachers do make mistakes. I made mistakes as a teacher. So parents, I encourage you, teachers are not perfect people. We do make mistakes as educators from time to time, but we need to learn to, give them the benefit of the doubt sometimes, because it can be very challenging. And I think one of the things that I think teachers face would be somewhat overload. Would you agree?
I think many teachers would express those feelings of, this not reaching around, not being enough.
And sometimes maybe us as parents, we don't understand that. Maybe we think, well, what's the teacher doing? Why is my child not getting this? Why is he bringing so much homework at home? Maybe we should start looking at it now. What can I do to help the teacher meet the needs?
That's a great question to ask, actually. For parents, simply go to your child's teacher and ask, what can I do? How can I help my child? Are there things that you would appreciate if I would do? And you'd be amazed at the answers you get from teachers by simply asking that question. And who benefits? The child.
The child. And because that's the ultimate goal, is the child. Let's switch gears a little bit. As we think of education, what should we really, let's talk spiritual things for a little bit. What should be the main focus? So maybe we talked a little bit earlier, but what should come first in the education of a child? Should the spiritual need come first or the academics?
I would probably push them all together.
Okay.
And
elaborate on that for a little bit.
I would probably, if you put them together, or if you split them and say, well, this is spiritual and this is solely academical, you run into a little bit of a difficulty with, okay, so spiritual, you want to be able to read the Bible. Well, what do you need? What skills do you need to read the Bible? Well, you need to be able to read words. You need, an understanding of literature and literary forms helps. And, you need some numbers to be able to read the Bible, the numbers that you find in there.
Yeah.
And so, they're very much intertwined.
Absolutely.
And so, but I would say maybe the biggest danger is not, maybe I would say it this way. I think the biggest danger is trying to cut the spiritual aspect out of education. Mm-hmm. And I would say maybe that's where we get into the difficulty, because our lives very much, we have spiritual things. It's a part of our lives.
It's intertwined.
It is intertwined or mixed, or it's inseparable. Mm-hmm. And so to cut out God and some of his foundational things and his laws and his purposes kind of leaves a big gaping hole in education. And so that needs maybe filled in with something else, and so that doesn't work well. It's missing. It's not a well-rounded education if that's taken out.
Absolutely, and I would agree fully with that. I think it must be together. If we try to separate one from the other, it will crumble sooner or later. I think it's the what holds education together is when we can look at the spiritual side and the academic side, and we can bring them together. I think that's what God wants.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, God is very orderly, and so math is simply a study of some of those orderly methods of God. And English, God speaks, and so English is understanding God's words and that revelation. And science is a study of the laws of creation around us, and history is a study of God's dealings with man through over years and years. And so, geography, studying of creation all over the world, basically your subjects that you study in school have God all. It's a part of it,
right?
And so it's basically a spiritual study.
Well, Craig, this has been a very good discussion. No doubt we can keep going on and on. Is there anything that you would want to leave with us before we close?
Earlier when we started out, you asked the question, what is education? And I think that's a good question. I think that's a really good question. And sometimes we as teachers, and I think parents are prone to this as well, we look at education as a set of facts or some things that the child needs to get. And if we can just get it, like if only they had a copy and paste option where you could just put certain formulas, certain knowledge in, and they'd be good.
Yes.
And if it's just that, I think we missed it. Because it's not a set of formulas. It's not like taking a pitcher of water and filling up the cup and we got it. I would compare it more to lighting a candle, maybe. And once that candle's going, it has the potential to grow, or even a plant. You put the right things with that plant, and it grows, and the possibilities are endless. And so I would look at it as more as nurturing and developing and instilling that love and helping the child to grow rather than just filling them up.
Yeah.
And if you fill them up, once the cup's full, you're done. If it's helping them grow, the possibilities are endless. They go much further. Absolutely. And so I would maybe come back and point us as teachers, but to you as parents as well, point to that view of education as being key. And I think years from now, our children will come back and thank us for having that view, but also for simply having enough love and care to invest in education.
And one of the things I want to say, not only to parents, but those of you that are teachers, maybe teachers are listening to us tonight, you have a very noble job. And so, yeah, it might be challenging at times. At times, it might be very challenging, but in the end, it pays. I remember going home when I saw that a student grasp a new concept. That was amazing to see that child just, wow, something new opened in their minds. And that was amazing. So teachers, I want to encourage you, keep doing what you do and do the best with God's help. Seek God's direction daily as you teach these children. So yeah, even though it's challenging, don't give up. God has a plan for all that you do. And parents, keep supporting your school. Keep supporting teachers that are challenged, are tasked with the responsibility of educating your child. And at the same time, parents, I would say, take your God-given responsibility seriously. Craig, I appreciate your time. I guess the time is up here, but I appreciate you coming on the show this evening and sharing with us. And God bless you for the work you've been doing as a school administrator, as a school teacher. You've been doing this for years, and God bless you. I think you've done a wonderful job. I've worked with you before, so again, brother, it has been a pleasure being with you. Friends, once again, we're sorry for the internet connection problem, but we'll try and sort that out soon. But anyway, for next week, we're planning to go live again, and we'll be sending out a message for you to so you know what we'll be doing next week. But yes, thank you for your support, and may God bless you. Thank you.